edit, right? Right? Make it public.
No, it's already public.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you tell me if it's live. It's live.
Yes.
Hi, guys. Welcome to today's webinar with Gibson Biddle, former VP product at Netflix. My name is Andre from Productized, and I'm also with my colleague, Anna.
Hello, guys. Welcome to our webinar.
So we'll be hosting the webinar. Actually, it's our very, very first webinar. And in today's webinar, we'll have, I think, over 200 people actually sign up for this webinar, all the way from US, Vietnam, Iceland, and many, many other countries. So before we start, let me just give you a brief intro on Gibbs, as it's also been called. And hi, Gib. Welcome to Productized webinar. Really glad to have
Andre.
you.
Thanks for having me. Hi, Anna. Nice to see you both. Happy to be here. Hello, Iceland.
Hope they're online already. So Gibson, you're a guest lecturer and also a teacher of graduate level entrepreneurship and products management courses at Stanford. You're an advisor to a half dozen Silicon Valley startups. Also, you have been giving a number of lectures and workshops and talks on product leadership all around the world. I think it's just important to refer that you also began your career as a producer at Electronic Arts. Then you sold your first startup, Creative Wonders, to the Learning Company. You helped TLC, which is an educational software company, to grow, and then sold the company to Mattel for $3.5 billion. In 2005, Gib joined Netflix as VP of Product, and in 2007, launched the video streaming service that more than 140 million members now use and love, and I guess you're one of those. In 2010, Gib joined his next startup, Chegg. Chegg has helped students save nearly $1 billion by enabling students to rent textbooks instead of buying them. In 2012, Gib launched Chegg Study, a monthly homework help service that millions of students use each year to save time, save money, and get smarter. So Chegg went public in 2013 and now has a market cap of 5.4 B. Today, we'll have a webinar that is going to be, we hope, very interesting, and very excited to hear what you have to say. So over to you, Gib.
Good. Thanks a ton for having me. I'm going to share my slides because I think it will be helpful. And glad to have everybody tuned in online today. So my talk today, is everything cool? Guys, everything working?
Everything working.
Awesome.
Yes.
It's called Netflix's Customer Obsession. I built in a little online polling and Q&A. So log in on another device at slido.com at pwebinar. And my very first question that I have for you in order to sort of warm up the polling is to simply ask, are you a Netflix member? And so I would love it if you could take a moment to respond on slido.com at pwebinar with a yes or a no. Okay. And I'm hoping that there are many of you out there.
All right. We're also joining on slido.com. Then we'll have to search for pwebinar and then just answer the poll. So are you a live Netflix member? I am, actually. Yes.
I am. I'm a heavy user, actually. I'm not just
Thank
a member.
And usually when I talk to folks all around the world, it's usually about 80% of folks, which is very exciting because when I joined Netflix, there were 1 million members, and now it's pretty close to 150 million, which is way cool. All right, so this is mainly a training because I've got a bunch of built-in interaction today where I'll be asking some questions to find out what you think. And then I'm happy at the end to answer questions. Oh, so sad somebody is not a member. And sometimes I joke with folks to ask if they're paying. I don't care if you're paying or not. The simple question is, are you using it or not? And Netflix really doesn't care the extent to which people are sharing. All right, so I think we've warmed up the engine. And so my second question, I'm going to do a little Net Promoter Score. And I'd like you to think about your experience with Netflix on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 sucks and 10 is awesome. And pick a number in your head and then answer the question, is that number, excellent at 9 or 10? Or is it in the 7 to 8 range? Or are you a detractor where you find you just don't like the service, and that means you'd give it a 0 to 6? So what I'm doing right now is just a little informal quantitative research, a survey, to try to get a sense of how much folks enjoy Netflix. And it's it's cool. I can see it right now. The way you calculate NPS is you take the percentage that gave it a 9 or a 10, that's a 71, and you back out the percent that gave it a 0 to 6. So right now it's 71 less 6. It's about 65 Netflix. 50 is good. 70 is considered world class. Most of the time when I do a survey like this, the Net Promoter Score is at about 70. And now what I love are those detractors. And I love getting inside their heads and understanding what they don't like about the service. And today, that's typically complaints that there's not enough good content for them. There's not enough original content, that the content they want isn't available in all the countries that they are traveling to. Or sometimes it's just as simple as they don't have enough time. And I love, part of my idea with customer obsession is to focus on those wonderfully dissatisfied people. Because as product leaders, it's our desire to delight customers. That desire drives us to invent on their behalf. And you'll see later that I've joined a lot of small startups and then helped them to grow. And the trick is, how do you find ideas that help people point in the right direction? And I have found that this idea of customer's obsession, of maniacally focusing on how you can delight your customer, to be a wonderful true north for a company. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my early career. I joined Electronic Arts in 1991. I was a producer building bang bang shoot 'em up games. These are all the letters that I got from gamers. This is old school. I'd read these letters, I'd get feedback, and I can't say it was particularly helpful to me. At the time, I was trained to listen to customers. I was also competitive. You were trained to put a picture of the product manager you were competing with on your desk. This was old Microsoft thinking. And I can't say that any of these things were particularly helpful to me. And I was a co-founder of a software kids company called Creative Wonders. This is Elmo. My first hit product was Elmo's Preschool. And it was the big hit in probably, 1998 or something. That was the year that Oprah Winfrey threw Tickle Me Elmos onto the stage. But at the end of the day, this ended up being a fairly delightful experience. And I helped that kids software company grow up. We signed Madeline, the little French girl, Schoolhouse Rock, Arthur, and then sold the company to this gentleman. This is Kevin O'Leary. He was the CEO of the Learning Company. And you might recognize him if anybody ever watches Shark Tank. So he's Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank. And sold that company, in fact, helped the Learning Company to grow. And then we sold it to Mattel. And it was, we felt pretty good about things. We sold it to Mattel for like $3.5 billion. That's how Kevin made his money. But something bad happened. A year later, Mattel spun the company back out. And now it was only worth $350 million. And this was a real failure on my part to build long-term enduring value. I spend much more time today thinking about how do you build things that are hard to copy. And I had failed. So this is Reed Hastings. It's now 2005. For folks around the world, you may not know it, but Netflix began as a DVD by mail company. When I joined, it was about 1 million members. And our job was to get you a DVD in the mail the next day. You would create a list of titles that you wanted sent to you, a queue, And we would send the title at the top of your list. When you sent it back, we sent you the next one on the list. That's how Netflix began. And Reed's interview of me was pretty simple. His first question was, can you delight customers? And I said, yes. I built Elmo's preschool, and luckily his kids had used it and enjoyed it. His second question was harder. He said, can you do consumer science? And luckily, I knew what he meant by consumer science because I had asked him, what did he want his legacy to be? And his answer to me was that he hoped that that Netflix could be a company that was all about consumer science. The idea was, he sort of said, hey, I don't really understand or know very much about style or fashion. I'm not a Steve Jobs type person. But what I want to do is create a system where we can test anything and everything to discover what works with consumers and what doesn't. And this was the beginning for us of A/B testing. And that was his notion of consumer science. And so there's really two tales that I want to share with you in this talk. The first is, early in my career, I had learned about this idea of customer focus, of satisfying customers, of listening, of competing with competitors. But in the second half of my career, I found a much more powerful idea, which is all about customer obsession. How can you delight customers? How can you engage in this experimental process to invent the future? And that's how I think about customer obsession. The other part of this journey is to talk about the growth of Netflix. This is what Netflix looked like in the early startup days, and I'm sure that any designer around the world could say this sucks. This is also a product leader trick. Always show how sucky the site was before you arrived. And this was my experience a couple of nights ago. I'm always revealing too much about my movie tastes, but I hope that you feel like it's gotten better over that period of time. And so to understand my career, I was Electronic Arts Learning Company. I was at Netflix from 2005, and then I joined Chegg, this textbook rental company, in 2010. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've mainly been focused on teaching, writing, and workshops. And yes, I work with a bunch of different startups. All right, so there's 3 chapters to my story today. The first, I want to explain something that I call the DHM model. And then I want to talk about consumer science, and I want to talk about it specifically in the area of personalization. And then I'm going to end with a modern day case, a question that Netflix has, which is, when you join, you have a 1-month free trial. And the simple question is, should Netflix send a free trial reminder at the end of 27 or 28 days, letting you know your free trial will be about to end? So I'm going to start with this DHM model. The job of a product leader, I can describe it very simply, but it's also incredibly hard. The way I think about the job is to delight customers in these hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And the margin enhancing is basically a fancy way to say, make money. This is the job. And this is what I call the DHM model. And I want to illustrate how hard this model can be. And the first thing I want to talk about is this balancing act between delight and margin. I know that you'd all be wonderfully happy if Netflix were to chop your price in half and gave you exact same product today. That would be delightful, but it wouldn't help them to build a successful business where they can invest profits in making the product better for you with more and more original content. And I want to share how we first began to think about this balancing act. So in the old days of Netflix, when we were a DVD company, everybody wanted the same thing. A movie would come out, and 2 months later, the DVD would be available. And everybody wanted those new release DVDs faster in the mail. And our real problem was that we didn't have enough inventory. And we knew that a year later, nobody would need all those discs. So we bought about half what we needed. And that meant people had to wait for the disc that they want. So we did a big test. This is when we had about 1 million customers. But I want to first point out that all of our customers, those detractors, those customers that were nicely complaining about the survey via survey, focus groups, and customer support data, they're calling in to say, I want my disc faster. That was the insight. And we created an A/B test. And what we did is we took, let's say, 10,000 of those 1 million members, and we put them in an experience where they got their new release disc the very next day in the mail. This was the perfect new release delivery test cell. And here was the result. And it surprised us. The metric that we focused on was making sure at the end of every month that people do not cancel. And the notion is called retention. In the old days, retention, people would cancel maybe 10% per month. Today, it's like 2% cancel. The retention is dramatically better. And we were very surprised in this test that cancel rate barely changed. It went from 4.5% canceling each month to only 4.45%. And which is to say, it helped those customers a little, but not very much. And now I want to share the math with you. If you rolled this test out to all members, we would have saved 5,000 customers out of the million that we had. And the way to value that was we would save those 5,000 customers. The lifetime value of a customer at the time was $100. And then we multiplied it by 2 for a word of mouth factor. And the idea was if a customer was happy with the service, they might rave about it, tell a friend, and that would help us to bring a new customer into the service. So the way we valued saving those 5,000 customers through this perfect new release experience, if we were to roll it out to all, we said it was worth about $1 million. But the question is, what does it cost to create that perfect new delivery experience for members? And the answer was, it cost us $5 million. And here's the challenge of the balancing act between delight and margin. On one hand, you do this good thing for the customer. It creates about $1 million in value, but you're going to be spending $5 million. So my simple question of you was, would you roll this new release test out to all, or would you not? So we know the results of a test within 10% of the customers. And based on this data, would you make the decision to create this perfect new release for all of the members out there, or would you choose not to launch? And I can see already that most of the folks are saying no launch, that the math doesn't make sense. You're creating $1 million worth of value and you're spending $5 million. And the real surprise of this test was that we thought customers would value this a lot. And the test results showed that no, that was not the case. Now, from time to time, I have people that make an excellent argument for why you might do this. And the answer is you may have a different word of mouth factor. We use a word of mouth factor of 2. Amazon often uses a word of mouth factor of 8x. And if you did the math there, you would have rolled this out. And frankly, it's very hard to determine exactly what the new release, what that word of mouth factor should be. And so I'm delighted and impressed that someone thought maybe we should roll this out, despite the fact that the math doesn't make sense today. But in our case, we chose not to launch. We frankly didn't have the money to invest in that additional inventory. So I've shared with you the balancing act between delight and margin. And now I want you to think about what makes a product hard to copy. So I want you thinking about if I gave you $500 million to create a startup to compete with Netflix, what would be hard about that? What would keep you from succeeding? And for me, and I'm sure most of you are thinking about, the cost of original content, what have you. But I just want to give you an example of what hard to copy means. HB Mock was a product manager, worked for me. He created this happy family on a couch, and it improved conversion. More people clicked on the red button. And so he was delighting folks, and he was helping to build a bigger business. But my argument to him is this is wicked easy to copy, HB. And I sort of bet my salary that within a month, our competitor at the time, Blockbuster, would have a happy family on the couch, which is exactly what they did. But let's get back to that question. What is hard to copy about Netflix? And for me, there's sort of 4 buckets of ideas. The first is the notion of a brand. You all trust Netflix with your credit cards. The other is Netflix has some wonderfully unique technology. Personalization is an example. Netflix also managed to create a network effect. Every device in the world, every television, every Blu-ray player, every game system is already connected such that you can watch on your television. And then there's a notion of economy of scale. And Netflix has this huge advantage in the original content because last year they were able to spend $13 billion on content because they are able to amortize that. They're able to get value from 150 million members around the world. Where I joke, where poor Amazon can only spend $3 or $4 billion, and poor Hulu can only spend $1 or $2 billion. So Netflix has this huge advantage just through its economy of scale. These are 4 examples of the kinds of things that make the work that you do as a product leader wonderfully hard to copy. And that was my main lesson from, when sold Mattel for $3.5 billion and it was worth 1/10 the next year. How do you build this hard to copy advantage? So the job for me as a product leader is to answer the question, and this is what product strategy is all about. What are the ideas that will delight customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways? And I'm sharing with you 8 high-level theories and hypotheses that we engaged in over 5 years trying to answer this question. And I want you to think for a moment about what percentage of time did Netflix get it right? And I think you'll be surprised by the answer. In the early days, only 3 out of these 8 ideas worked. When we created a simpler experience, it improved retention, personalized experience, improved retention. And of course, there was huge value in delivering DVDs the next day in the mail, and of course, streaming. But some other ideas like friends and social, we built a social network, just like Facebook. And the idea was you'd get great movie ideas from your friend. You wouldn't want to leave because all your friends would be connected. We had a bit of a network effect. And it turns out that it didn't work for Netflix, and really for 2 reasons. Your friends have sucky movie taste, let's be clear. And then the second is you don't want your friends to know exactly what you're watching. You have some guilty pleasures, and I'm sure this is true of all of you. It turned out that 2 of those ideas that failed, one was opening up the application programming interfaces. It enabled the device ecosystem, which was awesome. We actually tested exclusive content back in 2007, 2008, and it worked in 2013 with the launch of House of Cards, at the time that Netflix had an advantage of scale. So here are the high-level theories or product strategies that at the end of the day work to delight customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. And so if I want to look smart, these are the 5 strategies that help Netflix be successful. And in this case, I'm showing a variety of projects or tactics against each of those strategies. And the important thing at Netflix is that for every one of those strategies, we also had proxy metrics, ways to measure whether or not these strategies were working. So we had a high-level metric in retention, but we had a number of smaller proxy metrics that helped us to validate whether personalization was a good idea or a bad idea. And I'll explain a few of these later. All right, so the second chapter of the story is all about consumer science, and I'm going to talk about the growth of personalization. And I have a variety of questions for you. I call them pop quizzes, and I think you will be surprised by the results. Even knowing the outcome and that things worked out for Netflix, I just want to impress on you how challenging it can be to get inside that head of consumers and understand what will work or what not. And when I refer to consumer science, I'm really talking about consumer insight through 4 sources. The first is qualitative focus groups. Another is survey. I did a Net Promoter survey at the beginning of this. The other is digging in the dirt and looking at existing data in order to see patterns or trends to help form these future hypotheses. And the big dog in consumer science for me is the ability to execute these A/B tests, to create, in that story that I shared with you earlier, an experience for 10,000 customers to see what would work or not, and to validate whether or not we should launch it to all. So these are 4 techniques that I engage in all the time to try to understand what consumers value and what they don't. And consumer science is really the scientific method. You form a hypothesis. will next day new release disc delivery improve retention. You engage in the experiment, then you look at the data, the results. And in that case, we looked at the data and we chose not to do it. We had the findings, the conclusions. And what I love about all of this is human judgment is still needed. So we're not out of jobs as yet with the advent of AI and machine learning. So I want to talk about consumer science in the context of personalization. This is what Netflix looked like in 2005. And if you look at it, it's not very sophisticated. It's actually merchandising new releases on the left side, which is a no-no because these were the discs that we didn't have in stock. And you can actually see the Netflix first. That was a bit of the experimentation about exclusive content. And then I want you to notice the tab that's called recommendations. And this was the beginning effort of personalization. You also notice the friends tab and the queue. But recommendations, I'll tell you the first thing about personalization is never use the word recommendation. You want to talk with people as though they're human. You would never recommend somebody go have coffee with a friend. You'd never recommend somebody go on a date with someone. You say, hey, I think you might like meeting this person. So recommendation is just a bad word. All right, so the product strategy, and I'm going to describe, I call it the personalization swim lane. It was a team of designers, engineer, product leaders, all working together with the high-level theory that a personalized experience would improve retention. And in fact, they had a strategy of their own in the swim lane. Their theory was if they could gather explicit data, that really means asking you what your movie tastes are. Would you rate this movie 3, 4, or 5 stars? Implicit data, it understood that Netflix got a lot of value in seeing what you choose to watch, seeing what you quit 12 seconds into a movie. This is implicit data. And the idea was to get to know you and your movie tastes and have all the data about the different movies and magically connect those two sources using matching algorithms. And there's a fourth theory. The fourth theory was if Netflix could have higher and higher quality movies over time, as measured by the star ratings, that if the quality of those movies for you was higher, you would retain better. So these are 4 theories within the swim lane. And of course, we had metrics to track our progress, to see if each of these theories worked. And I'm going to share each of these metrics with you. And spoiler alert, 3 of these strategies worked and 1 did not. And I'll let you think about and guess which is the failed strategy here. But here was our product strategy. Here were the metrics. And then a variety of projects against each of these explicit product strategies. And this is how I think about product strategies, the lockup between the strategy on the left, the metric that measures whether you're making improvement, and then tactics or projects that line up against each of those strategies. And this was the strategy in the personalization area. So I told you I'm going to confound you a little bit, even though you know the result. But I want you to look at the screen. It's 2007. Things look a little bit better. I want you to notice the tabs and notice this movies you'll heart thing with the little heart. That's the designers called that fugly. That's like funky plus ugly. I'm sure it's a design term. But the question here, this is the proxy metric. I want you thinking about what % of members rate at least 50 movies in their first 6 weeks. This is a new member. What % rated at least 50 movies in the first 6 weeks? And the proxy was, our theory was if you rated a bunch of movies, it was because you valued the result. It was a sign that you valued the personalized movie choice that you were given back. So I'd love it if using Slido, you could indicate what your best guess is. What percentage of members in their first 6 weeks with the service rate at least 50 movies? And I'm very curious to see where we land on this. I'm loving it. So the way I think about it is that the folks, the 0s to 5s, I call them the curmudgeons. We would have the youthful enthusiasts way up at the more than 40%. Clearly so far the consensus is it's all in the 0 to 5%. I'm nicely thinking about you as having little faith. All right, so now you're deeply curious to know the answer. So this is surprising. This one, it topped out at 28%. So much higher than folks expect. And I'll give you a little insight as to why. So here's the data. You can see the growth of this metric up into close to 28% by 2010. And then you can see it dropping off. And the question is, why does it drop off? The answer, that's when streaming started to get big. And we no longer needed as much explicit data. But the answer to the question about how we got so much rating data, if you remember that little Movies You'll Heart tab, this is something we call the ratings wizard. People were attracted to that little fugly heart, and they clicked on this page, and there was a statement: the more that you rate, the better it will do at finding movies you'll love. And at this moment in time, people would go through and they would rate like crazy. This was one of the single most successful tactics in working to get explicit movie taste from people. And it was really, really important to us. Over time, Netflix gathered something like 10 billion star ratings, which is pretty cool. So a surprise. So my second pop quiz, this is my family. That's me on the right. I'm awkward 57. Kristen's my wife on the left. My two daughters are 21 and 23. And the question here, and this was the algorithmic question. It turns out it was easy for us to get the data on how old you are and whether you're male or female. And the question is, will inputting the knowledge of your age and gender help Netflix to predict your movie tastes? This is a simple yes or no. So does it make the matching algorithms better to know whether or not you're 57 and male, or if you're 23 and female? This is the question that I'm hoping you'll reflect on. And I can see the trend line. We're clearly trending towards, of course, age and gender will help. And the answer is no, which was really surprising to us, okay? So the way to think about this is it's much better, you get much more insight about predicting someone's movie taste if you know one or two movies that they like. It turns out that age and gender isn't a particularly good predictor. And this was massively surprising to us. Another way of thinking about this is people's movie tastes are wonderfully unique. Age and gender really doesn't help you predict much. Now, what was the data? How did we know this? We had something called RMSE, root mean squared error. It basically, if we predicted that you, Andre, would like Star Wars 4 stars and you rated it 4 stars, we were perfect in our rating. If we thought you'd like Columbo 2 stars and gave it 2 stars, again, we were perfect in our rating. And RMSE is one of those metrics that it wants to go down and to the right. The closer you get that metric to 0, the better you're doing. So we added the data to our matching algorithms, and it did not lower RMSE. It did not give us any more predictive power, which is a big surprise.
Right.
The algorithm that was incredibly effective was called collaborative filtering. And the way collaborative filtering works is that because you've just added icon, that top title on the right, to your queue at position 2, it turns out that people who like icon also like Emily and mostly Martha. And so the way to think about this is if Andre likes Star Wars and Friends, and Anna likes Friends, the collaborative filtering predicts that maybe Anna will like Star Wars too. And that's really the way collaborative filtering works at high scale. Now notice it has no knowledge about why you like it. It's just what the math says. And sometimes you get weird things because you like Western movies and Star Wars. We think you like Sesame Street as well, which is totally bizarre. Okay, but the collaborative filtering was the big dog algorithm, and we had a challenge. We only had one engineer working on it, Stan Lanning. And the challenge was, how do we get more? And we did something called the Netflix prize. And so we put it out there and we said, hey, we'll give $1 million to anybody who can build a better collaborative filtering algorithm than us. Anybody who can lower our RMSE score by at least 10%. And it was a great thing. We had about 5,000 engineers around the world engaged in the problem, which was way cool. Now, we learned some things right away. If you look at these team names, they are bizarre. You have a team name called Belcore's Pragmatic Chaos. You've got Opera Solutions and Vandalay United. What was going on was these teams, when they knew that they weren't in the number one position, they would combine their algorithms with another team. And what they learned was the more algorithms, the better. And that was one of our very first insights from this Netflix prize thing. Now, the other thing we learned was, remember all those ratings we got in the first 6 weeks? Most of those ratings were not for titles that they had watched while they were with us. They were movies that they remembered from the past. And it turned out that all ratings data is not created equal. That the ratings data that we had in real time while you were watching on Netflix was substantially better than all that old data about what you remembered. So anyways, just amazing insights. And we made an algorithm that was 10% better. And so my next question is, we paid out the $1 million to Belcore's Pragmatic Chaos. And the question is, when we execute the new algorithm, will we improve retention? And that's the question I put to you. Is a better algorithm that demonstrably predicts your movie tastes better, is it good enough to actually improve retention? At the end of every month, could it take some small percentage of people and nicely cause them not to cancel? And that is the question that I put to you right now. And I'm seeing a lot of faith in engineers. I'm seeing a lot of faith in algorithms. It's good. We should all put faith in engineers. It's all good. I know I'm also at this point, I'm starting to twist your mind around, eroding your confidence about whether you're right or wrong. So I will tell you the answer. Sadly, it did not improve retention. One insight was a lot of these changes, our best changes or the most impactful, were a combination of work that you could see, the visual design, and the great work of engineers. So this was surprising to us. One of the things that came out of just that insight, that it's between what you can see and the algorithm, and more algorithms is better, we created something called the category interest algorithm. So and what we did is there was a company called Pandora. They had something called the Music Genome Project. They had lots of music experts tagging musics, saying that Jack Johnson does music, about surfing. He's laid back, he's relaxed, he's acoustic. They were tagging all the characteristics of his music. And we thought it was working, so we tried something similar. We had 50 people down in LA, and this was essentially the Movie Genome Project, and they were tagging all the attributes of different movies. And so in this case, this would be me. Hey, Gib, because you like the movie Airplane, we think you're going to like the movies Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and a collection of cult comedies from the 1980s. And this is the first time that Netflix was able to give insight into why you would like a movie. And now there's presentation layer work that you can see, plus the bright algorithms behind the scenes. And this is an example of how Netflix was able to improve retention through personalization, which was very exciting. All right, so you probably got the memo that there's a metric for everything at Netflix. Crystal Chancuti, her job was to merchandise data. Her job was to merchandise DVDs, and the metric was the percentage of members who had more than 6 DVDs to their queue each month. And you could see she was doing a wonderfully successful job, and then something bad happened around 2010. And the answer is that's when Netflix started to shift aggressively into streaming. And Brent Avery's job was defined as percentage of members who watched at least 15 minutes in a month. In the early days, we had sort of a stinky catalog. Today, you know, I'm sure the metric for a person like this would be something like percentage of members that watch at least 20 hours in a month. But anyways, you can see that streaming's going up to the right, which is incredibly exciting. DVD is falling by the wayside. For the first time, we can launch into countries outside the US with streaming only, which is how you know it today. And so here's the quick question. This is very exciting. We're now an international company. And you can stream in France or Portugal or wherever you are. And the question I will pose to you is it helpful for the algorithm to know that you're French, that you live in France, that you're French? Will it help Netflix to predict your movie tastes? And that is the question that I pose of you.
I bet it does.
Will it help?
We're betting it does.
Yes, I think so too.
Oh, you're getting faithful on me now, Anna, huh? What are you thinking, Andre? Is it going to help or not?
Yeah, I think French people are very much inclined towards French material, so French movies, and so on and so forth.
Really interesting. Yeah, we have a lot of people trending towards the yes. At some point, you're probably learning to guess the opposite of what your instincts were, because this is so freaking hard. You know, the answer was, it's pretty similar to the demographic data, which is, like, if you want to do a little experiment, create a sub profile on Netflix, you know, for a kid in your household or whatever, for anyone else.
Yeah.
And what they start with is really 3 simple questions. They just want to know, what 3 movies do you like?
Yeah.
Okay. And once again, it's not particularly helpful to know that you're French or that you live in France. It's much more important to know just 1, 2, or maybe 3 titles that you like. And you can do that experiment at home. You can set up a profile for someone else in your home. I mean, that's a tactic by Netflix, acknowledging that there are multiple people in the household and they have different tastes. But it starts with a very simple question. Tell me 1, 2, or 3 movies that you like. All right, so consumer science is not always hard. So remember, Netflix created the 5-star rating system, collected 10 billion ratings, and then this darn company called Facebook came along with this very simple and easy gesture. Thumbs up, thumbs down. And Netflix tested this, thumbs up, thumbs down, versus, is it 3 stars, is it 4 stars, is it 5 stars? And in this case, the A/B test was wonderfully clear, which is using this simpler gesture of thumbs up and thumbs down, you got twice as much taste data. Okay, so simple beats complete with the 5-star system, which is really interesting. And we'll start thinking about the ramifications of this. So remember the 4th theory, that over time, if the quality of movies that you watch got better and better and better, then retention would improve. And yes, the average quality of the movies got better and better and better, but there was no evidence that suggested that this helped improve retention. There was no data to support the hypothesis, which was really kind of a head scratcher. And so in this case, it led Netflix back to another source of consumer insight, which is qualitative. They started talking to people about their movie taste. And if I were to ask somebody that I didn't know well, name a favorite movie, they're going to say something like Hotel Rwanda, you know, a movie that makes them sound thoughtful and caring and smart. They might also bring up some documentaries that make them sound wicked smart. Turns out when you start digging deeper, people are watching a lot of stuff, and not clear that high star ratings is really an important driver in movie enjoyment. So it's those guilty pleasures. You know, it turns out what drives enjoyment is a movie like Paul Blart Mall Cop, which only has a 3-star rating, but this is the kind of stuff that people enjoy watching, and this is the reason that they stay with the service. In fact, Paul Blart Mall Cop was so good, they had to do Paul Blart Mall Cop 2. And this was a substantial insight derived through qualitative, with the surprise that movie rating does not equal movie enjoyment. And it drove Netflix in an unexpected direction. This is Adam Sandler, one of the first original content deals. They did a 6-movie title deal with Adam Sandler The first one was called The Ridiculous Six. It was a movie Western. The reviews said something like this: if you found Paul Blart's Mall Cop 2 intellectually demanding, then The Ridiculous Six is made for you. Okay, that's what it was like. You can still see the remnants of this. I think Adam Sandler did a recent movie. It was the Mystery Murder or something. And I think Netflix did the data that shared some of it, like 80 million people viewed it in the first week. It's unbelievable. So, the idea is that people just want to enjoy a movie, and it doesn't really matter if it's a 5-star movie. And that leaves Netflix in this place where the stars are gone. So if you look carefully on your site, this is me. It says that Casino is a 98% match for me. It's not making an assessment of the quality of the movie. It's just saying that they think I will enjoy it. And so the stars are gone, and this is how they've managed that transition. Personalization. Personalization is so important. Remember I talked about delighting customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways? The really cool thing about personalization today is Netflix has the data for movie taste for 150 million people worldwide. It predicted that 100 million people would watch Stranger Things. That was their forecast. And they were willing to invest, let's say, 500 million for knowing that. And they were right. And I don't know if there are fans out there, but I am a fan of BoJack Horseman, okay? And they look at the personalization data and they say, okay, we think about 10 million people will watch BoJack Horseman. And based on that, they make an investment about $50 million, substantially less. But the idea is through personalization, they can right-size their investment knowing the size of the audience, which I think is super cool. And that's what drives their business, the margin enhancement, getting that right sizing right. All right, so I said Netflix has got a problem today. This is a modern day case for you. And I want you to think about these ideas that we've been talking about today. So this is the experience of someone who hasn't joined Netflix. And there are people, think of them as fence sitters. And they come to the site, and there's a big red button that says, try 30 days free. And so they engage in this free trial. And there's a question, which is the consumer insight that came in via the customer support group. It turns out that a lot of people are calling on day 32, day 33, saying, hey, I meant to cancel, I forgot, will you back me out of the system? And Netflix does the right thing, they say, sure. But it turns out there's about $10 million worth of phone calls in doing this. And this idea of cancel anytime, they're sort of interpreting that as, well, can I cancel at 34, 35? Netflix says yes. And that's the statement of cancel anytime is how you bring the fence sitters over the fence. But it costs 10 million bucks, all these little mistakes. And so a product manager says, what if we sent a free trial reminder to everybody via text, via email, via their personalized homepage on day 27? What if we did that? What would happen? So I just want to reveal the math a little bit to you. I want you to think for a moment of what percent of Netflix members, when they get to that homepage, click on the join free for a month, hand over their credit card, and enjoy that 1 month of free service. So if 100 people came to that site, how many would click the button, hand over the credit card, and sign up for the free trial? Do you have a guess on this one, Andre?
Yeah, actually, I would say at least 50, 60% or more.
Okay, you're my youthful optimist. Where are you, Anna?
Yeah, I'm more of a pessimist. I don't
Okay,
think
what's the number?
that a number. I don't know.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, so this is a shocking number. It's only 2%. I think the main insight is people didn't know when they clicked the button that they'd have to hand over their credit card. Okay, that's the main insight. So then the next question is, what percent convert from their free 1 month into paying service in month 2? And this is a surprising number 2, because the answer is 90%. Okay, so people really, really, really enjoy the experience. So now you contemplate sending a reminder at the end of 27 or 28 days. This is an easy thing to A/B test. So you have to ask yourself, the only number you care about here is what's going to happen to month 1 retention. And the theory is it's probably going to drop because those free trial reminders that you sent to somebody are going to get people to cancel. And that's correct. The number drops from 90% down to 85%. And if you do the math on this, congratulations, product manager, for the new member experience. You just lost the company $60 million. That's how big an impact that is. However, it's only 50 million because we're not going to be spending the money on the 10, answering those phone calls. So congratulations, you just lost the company only $50 million. And now I want you to think about the model of delighting customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. We just know already that you lost 50 million bucks. Anna, would sending a free trial reminder be a delightful experience for a customer?
I don't think so.
What do you think, Andre?
Yeah, I don't think it's delightful.
Well, let me ask you this question. How would you feel about a company that did this, that sent you a free trial reminder a few days before your free trial is out? How would you feel about that company?
I would feel that they were honest with their clients, right?
Yes. And so, and at the end of the day, what is it? How do you feel better about a company that's honest? And what is the potential hard to copy thing that we're talking about right now?
Trust.
It's trust. And what is the hard to copy word that goes with trust? What is it?
Wow.
It's red. It's got a big N at the beginning. It's called a brand. Okay. So here's the wild thing here. There is delight in doing this. You are building an even more hard to copy advantage in the brand, and you're going to lose 50 million bucks. And the next part of this question is this a high stakes or a low stakes decision? And most people intuitively say, well, it's a high stakes decision. It's 50 million bucks. However, Netflix is doing about 14 billion in revenue this year. And the product manager in this area, what he said is, this is low stakes. And he also said, not only is it only 50 million bucks against the 13 or 14 billion, but it's totally reversible. If I want to undo this at any moment, I can, which is incredible insight. And that brings to the last question, which is who makes this decision? And most people think it's the CEO or the CFO or whatever. In this case, I think it was Tom Willerer, who's the product manager in this area. It was his decision. Now at Netflix, there was a fight about this. Like, why would you do it? You're going to lose 50 million bucks. Can you really measure the value of delight in this hard to copy brand? Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And finally, Tom hears all this. He hears the debate. He hears the fighting. And then he's the decider. And then he just chooses what to do. And he did choose what to do. And the question I'll put of you right now is how many of you would choose to send the reminder to all and how many would choose not to? So you're in Tom's seat. You're going to lose 50 million bucks if you do it, if you send the reminder to all. But the advantage is you're going to build a delight and hard to copy brand advantage in this case. And the other thing is maybe you shouldn't sweat the decision too much because it's totally reversible. And in the grand scheme of things, it's only 50 million bucks. And I can tell through my soft words in the background that I'm slowly talking you into it, which is, it's a surprising result, but this is where I find this notion of thinking about how to delight customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways, and admitting it's a balancing act and admitting that judgment is still required to be an incredibly powerful thing. So Tom chose to send it to all. So what can you learn from this? This idea we belabor decisions. Not all of them are high stakes. This is low stakes because it was only 50 million bucks and it was totally reversible. The second is when you have these opportunities, when you can afford it, to double down on delight, to do the delightful thing, the surprising thing for a customer, do it. And then in this case, and I got it, which is you're doing the right thing. And this is an ethical issue. And so, yes, it costs 50 million bucks to do the right thing, but to build an even stronger brand. And then I gave you a little insight into the culture of Netflix. It's all about the debate. Tom made the decision, and all those people that thought he was an idiot for actually doing this magically lined up against him, which was way cool. All right, so I just have 3 last things for you to think about in building a great company. Just 3 more things. The first is it requires courage. It took Netflix about an hour to make the decision to invest $100 million in House of Cards in 2012. And it was a decision that only took 30 minutes by one person, Sydney Hudson, to when it was known that Kevin Spacey had engaged in sexual harassment, to cut him from the show and to stop the series. This decision-making requires courage. The other thing is required is patience. So this graph is the market cap of Netflix over time. It was worth close to nothing, 15 years ago. And today its market cap is around $150 billion. And I want you to notice that little blip in 2011, halfway across the page, where it went all the way up to 40 billion, which was a big deal. And then it dropped in the course of a few months down to 10 billion. What the heck happened there? And what had happened was, in the US, Netflix tried to separate its DVD and its streaming service and rename the new DVD service something called Quickster. And within a month, they were the butt of all jokes. And so the last thing I point out is decision-making. It requires humility. You're not always going to get it right. And Reed Hastings, the CEO, came out and said, I got it wrong. I failed to obsess over customers. And he did, his mea culpa. All right, so when I'm looking for companies to understand if they're obsessed, I'm really looking for 4 things. The first thing is, do they have access to existing data? Are they data focused? Are they working to build both customer and shareholder value? The next is, do they have some way of talking to customers in qualitative? The third is, do they have survey data? Do they understand the demographics, why people are canceling? I gave you an example of Net Promoter Score. And then, as companies mature, the ability to do A/B testing is just amazing, because sometimes it's hard to guess what's right or wrong. And the last thing is to have a strategy. Have your theories and hypotheses about how you will delight customers in hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways. So for me, customer obsession is about putting the customer at the center of everything you do to delight customers in these hard-to-copy, margin-enhancing ways to invent the future. And with that, I'd like to say thank you. I have some more time. There's a couple of things I want to introduce you to. So the first is, I am obsessed. So you've all seen a street performer doing their thing. They're breathing fire, they're juggling. And then the street performer passes the hat and everybody leaves, okay? And this is the moment that I pass the hat, except I'm not asking for money. All I'm looking for is some feedback. So if you hold up your phone, if that's possible for you, as though you're taking a photo, bring up your camera app. You don't have to click the button, but a QR code should magically leap up into the screen for you. And that is a link to SurveyMonkey. 0 sucks, 10 is awesome. I'd just love to know, pick a number. And then if you had a moment to give me insight about one thing that was good about this webinar and one thing that would be better, that is incredibly helpful to me. I'd love, love, love your feedback. I've done about 300 talks in the last 3 years. Every time I learn something new. So thanks in advance for that feedback. If it didn't work for you, my little baby website, I put the PDF for the presentation at the top of the page. There's a link to my survey. I wrote an article on customer obsession on Medium. There's a link there. My daughters are giving me grief. They say, Dad, you can't get to whatever it is, 5,000 Twitter followers, so follow me, save me. I'm going to hang out and answer questions via Slido. I realize that some people may have to go to lunch or dinner or breakfast, wherever you are around the world. But I'm going to hang out. A couple of things. There's 2 Lisbon events. On the left, you can sign up for my Hacking Your Product Leader Career workshop. It's a day-long workshop on November 20th. That QR code will take you to the link. There's a promo code, Gibson 15. What does that get me, Andre? Does it save me a lot of money?
Yes, you get 15% discount on your Masterclass in November. Cool. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I enter Gibson 50, I'll get 50% off, even better.
15% on top of the early bird price.
I'm joking with you. Okay, on the right, it's Productized, the main event. I'll be speaking there too. Is the QR code for you, which is awesome. Okay, Andre, I'm going to answer some questions. You got time?
Yeah, we have time.
Okay, cool. How were you able to convince the upper management to give $1 million cash prize for the RMSE algorithm challenge? Well, if you think about it, it was amazingly leveraged. So we got 5,000 engineers for only $1 million. So it worked out on the end. The honest truth, it was not a challenge in any way. Reed Hastings is upper management. He's the CEO. He's the engineer. I actually think he was the originator of the idea. We had all read a book called Latitude, which was about $1 million prize 200 years ago, and how do you discover the latitude? So it wasn't at all challenging, and it worked out really well in the end. Frankly, the biggest advantage of the Netflix prize, it was an incredible recruiting tactic, and we did not intend this. But for the first time, engineers in the country and around the world thought that Netflix was doing something cool, because before they thought we were just a silly little e-commerce site. So it was awesome. Okay, that's a great question. Alex, how to delight a customer without enough data? So I pointed out, and I get this problem all the time. You're a punk startup. You don't have a lot of customers. Notice that I gave you, 4 things to worry about. You can always do qualitative. You can always talk to your customer. You can always spend time with your customer in conversation. You can always have a strategy about how you hope to delight customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways. And over time, you can always have data about what's going on, even if you only have 100 customers. So just begin to form your metrics, your suite, and begin to try to tease out what is it that creates both customer, or first customer, and then second shareholder value. The hard part is it takes a while to develop the A/B test systems. But today, systems like Optimizely are wicked easy. You can do homepage testing in a snap. So, as you grow up, you just recognize you have 4 sources that make you customer obsessed. And, if you can't A/B test, rely heavily on the first 3. Okay, when you started streaming in 2007, the engineering side was a challenge. How confident were you?
I did that question.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
you had lots of ADSL connections, I guess,
Yeah, honestly, we had been working on the tools and technologies for about 3 or 4 years, like in the basement of the building. Mm-hmm. And we made guesses about when we'd launch. Frankly, the biggest challenge was getting the rights to content. So our intent in January of 2007 was to have 1,000 titles. And when we launched, we only had 300. It was just super hard. And frankly, they weren't very good titles. I jokingly refer to them as steamy romance, which is really code for something else. We were trying to build this virtuous cycle, and it just took us a long time. The idea was that the more members that we had, the more we could talk hardware companies like the game systems, Wii, PlayStation, Xbox, into enabling streaming to their device. The more members we had, the more devices that we had, the more content that we could afford. And it just took us a long time to get that cycle going. But obviously, it worked out in the end. All right, I'm going to, this is the reminder that QR code works. You can, and I'm wicked excited about going to Lisbon. And then if you remember one thing, you can go to the baby website. All the links, all the discount things are waiting for you at www.gibsonbiddle.com. I would love your feedback on today's presentation. Thanks a ton, Andre, for having me. Thanks a ton, Anna. And I'm looking forward to seeing folks in sunny Lisbon in November. Wicked excited.
Yes, we're sure you're going to have the time of your life in Lisbon with us.
Oh, you just made a promise to me, didn't you?
I did.
I'm back.
Yeah, we're also very, very happy for this webinar. We want to thank you for your time, and also almost 50 people or more that watched us today.
Good. That's great. This is how it starts. It's funny. I got a cute tweet from Slido. The integration of their tool into Google Slides is brand new, so I hope they got a kick out of that. And Peter and Yore, everything worked. Nothing broke.
All right, so guys, see you hopefully in Lisbon. We're actually planning to do another webinar here with Gibbs in September or October, but we'll keep you guys posted. If you want to know more about what you're doing, of course you can subscribe to our newsletter, or you can simply subscribe to the YouTube channel of Productized, which is the channel that we're using for this webinar. Again, Gibbs, really awesome to have you with us and learn your Netflix experience and actually being fooled all the way until the end, because I was very surprised with some of this results, and I guess I was not the only one.
Yes.
You are not the only one.
I want to thank you as well. I have a final question for you.
Sure.
I didn't put it on Slido, but yeah. With all this, every studio launching their own streaming service now, how do you think that this is going to impact the streaming industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. So remember, Netflix has been focused on how do they delight customers in hard to copy, margin enhancing ways for a long time. So the hard to copy advantage that they've been creating is they've been very, very focused on their original content. So they've been building that out for many years now. They knew that Disney was going to move off and do it on their own. They knew that HBO would get more aggressive. Netflix, Reed Hastings once joked that they're competing with sleep, right?
Yeah.
But the reason that people aren't watching more on Netflix is they need to sleep. And so, like, Disney is coming out, and Disney, I think, said it's going to be $5 in the US or $7. What that means is that people are going to join multiple services. Okay, so they'll have Netflix, but if you're a young family and you got a 2 and a 4-year-old, you're also going to have Disney. Okay, and Netflix acknowledges that, and it wants you to do that. It's not making it a promise that you have everything that you want. What it's been very focused on is how do they deliver a lot of stuff that you love, but at a great value. And that's really been what they've been about forever. It's that balancing act between delight, but also understanding that they're not going to give you everything because you don't value everything as much. And if they went to whatever 30 pounds per month, that everybody quit, right? Yeah. They've been trying to create an affordable service. We'll see how it plays out. I mean, they happened to surprise the world. They had a quarterly earnings where they had fewer new members this quarter than they expected. And they're still theorizing and hypothesizing, but what Reed said on the earnings call, it's not about the competition. And then he nicely reminded people that they had an amazing quarter the quarter before. And it's like, maybe everybody signed up that quarter and it's just hard to keep going at the same pace. But they're in the unknown now. I mean, think about what it is to have 150 million folks around the world. It's very exciting.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a ton. For anybody who's watching the recording after the fact, I'm sorry that you couldn't do the live polling, but you could at least notice that everybody was getting pretty tricked up by the questions because consumer science is hard. All right. Thanks a ton for playing. Thanks, Andre. Thanks,
Looking
Anna.
forward to you in Lisbon.
Yes. See you. Bye, Gib.
Bye-bye.
Cool. Bye.